I get asked this question all the time. How do I get big arms? I didn't have big arms when I first started. I figured out the secret. I'm going to tell it to you after this. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television, RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your weekly 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. Diet, training, supplementation, bodybuilding, non-bodybuilding. This is your forum to ask Dave whatever it is that you have on your mind. We go right into the questions. The first two questions on this show, of course, from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. First question, training-related question. I'm 6'4", long arms. When doing full range of motion during biceps, the tension dies. Would it be more beneficial doing partial reps or just staying in range where the tension remains? Is this ideal?
This is actually it's a very good question, and it's got good insight by the person who wrote the question, because I noticed this, and I've talked about this innumerable times on these podcasts and on other podcasts. I had trouble building my arms. I have a very long arm. My arm is very long for my height. And when you have a long arm like this person in the question has, for some reason the conventional barbell curls, preacher curls, they just don't work right. Like it's like if this arm is too long, you can't get the same contraction. Like I watched Lee Priest do dumbbell curls. He can do super heavy dumbbell curls, and you can tell it's all arm working because he has short arms. And I guess the biomechanics of it are very efficient for barbell curls and stuff like that. So I never really felt them. Even dumbbell curls, I feel a little bit more, but still, they just don't feel like when they get to here, it's like I don't have any tension on my biceps. And the partial reps never are the answer, because partial reps give you partial development. So I was reading an article in like one of the muscle magazines about Vince Taylor talking about how he does a lot of cable work for arms. He doesn't lift light cables, but he does cables because he feels the continuous tension is something that works for his arms. So Vince Taylor, basically in this article said that by using cables, you're gonna have a more concentrated effect on the muscle, the biceps or triceps, because you have continuous tension. Whereas with a bar or a dumbbell, at some point, especially if you have a long arm, you lose tension. And so that's why you're not feeling it. And that's why I wasn't feeling it in my arms. No matter how much I did for biceps and triceps, they just wouldn't get bigger. The rest of my body got bigger, but the other stuff from French presses and all the conventional stuff that most people do didn't work. So I said, I'm going to start doing cable curls, cable hammers, one arm at a time, because that's another thing he suggests, isolation, unilateral type movements. And I did it for tricep movements, overhead cables and all this stuff. And my arms grew. I mean, significantly the first, 8 to 10, 12 weeks. And then they continued to grow at a slower pace, but I felt it. And I think that's the key. If you don't feel what you're doing in the muscle that you're trying to train, you're not going to get any results from it. So not everyone can do every exercise, and you have to take into account, like this person noticed on their body, what they're feeling and what they're not feeling. And if you don't feel it, doing partial reps won't solve the problem. You have to find a better exercise. So for arms, I recommend, if you have a long arm and you're having trouble building them, try cable movements, unilateral, one arm at a time. You can do cable curls. You can do hammer curls like that. You can do overheads for triceps. You can I do one arm push downs, one reverse pull downs. And my arms grew, and they still look pretty good, for a guy 58 years old. So my suggestion is cables.
Second question, again, these first two from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Question about protein sources, dried meat, fish, or squid, your ideal sources for protein for bodybuilders.
I'm a big, salmon, red meat, chicken breast, whole egg guy, as far as the basics. But, all sources of like animals, are potential sources of protein. The question is, are you getting too much fat and too little protein, in some of these sources? Like I'm not a big fan of like chicken thighs or chicken legs, because I think they're fatty. And so I think I'm not against the fat, but I'm against the fact that you're getting less protein, more fat. So I tend to use leaner sources of protein like chicken breast. Now, when you talk about fishes, the fattier fishes are really good, because if you're using wild caught fish, you're getting really good quality of fats in those fish, whether it be swordfish or salmon or, Chilean sea bass or something like that. Likewise, I love whole eggs, because I think it's the perfect source of protein. And I'm not just talking about the whites, I'm talking about the yolks and the whites together. And I like red meat. I just think you have to watch. Some cuts are really, really fatty, and you don't want to get 50% fat, 50%, protein. So I usually tend to go for the top round cuts. If you're going to do ground beef, try to find the 96 or better, or even 94% lean or better. If you're going to go, if I go to a restaurant, I'll get a filet mignon cut. Usually, I don't wrestle with bones and fattier cuts, although I know a lot of people like the fattier cuts, and that's fine on, if you're going out for dinner on the weekend, but on a daily basis, you should try to eat leaner sources of protein. I think they're better for you, health wise. And I think you're getting more protein for your, more bang for your buck, so to speak. Can you eat squid? Can you eat deer, venison? Yeah, of course you can. If you like that stuff, that's fine. Shrimp. I mean, it's all sources of protein. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just unconventional. I think that's why a lot of people didn't eat it. I think if you live on the seashore, and you catch your own stuff, you might be eating a lot more crab and shrimp, as opposed to lean sources of protein. There's actually a company called Fit Fish that it's wild caught pollock. And they've been sending me fish. I've put it on my Instagram a few times. My next package that comes, I'll show you guys again. I think a lot of people are going to start ordering from them. They're really reasonably priced, and it's because it's hard to find wild caught fish at a reasonable price. And the stuff tastes really, really, really good. And I make it all the time. I put a little mac oil in a pan, or I put some soy sauce in the pan, and I just cook it right up. It cooks in literally 5 minutes. It's done. And I got him on in my office on a lot of it now too, because he's dieting for a show. So you guys are going to want to try that. But yeah, I like the conventional sources, but there's nothing wrong with the unconventional sources. I'm a big squid guy. I love squid. I like octopus when I go to sushi, or if I like grilled octopus. Like I said, I wouldn't eat that probably on a daily basis, but I like it. And both these questions, by the way, are both excellent questions from the Dave Palumbo Experience app, which is an app you can download on your phone. If you have an Android, at the Android store, if you have an iPhone, at the iTunes store. It's $29 a month. You get me as your coach in your back pocket, basically. All my writings, all my videos I've ever done in one place. It's a great resource. It's like a library of knowledge. All my protocols are in there, my diets, off-season keto diet. I have my drug protocols in there, detoxification protocols in there. Everything's in there. Plus, I answer everyone's questions in an open forum, so you get to see everyone's questions and answers. A great learning experience. I do a Q&A video every week just for the app members, so it's like an extra Ask Dave. And it's just a resource where you can constantly find the newest and greatest information, keep you up to date if you don't have time to scan the entire web and look for all the stuff, or if you don't believe a lot of the stuff out there, because a lot of it's BS. So you guys have been supporting that app for many years now, and I appreciate it. We have a lot of members, and everyone seems to really enjoy the community, and I want to thank you guys for doing it and supporting it, and that's why I keep providing the great information.
Before we go to the rest of our questions, our friends at Titan Medical Center have their weekly therapy sale, and it is on none other than the most talked about peptide that you get asked about, RETATRUTIDE at Titan Medical.
Yeah, I just want to say something about RETATRUTIDE, because I've been looking at some of these Hollywood celebrities. They look so grotesque. They got bones. These women have bones sticking out of their face. They look like skeletons. I'm not going to mention names. You know who I'm talking about. But there's many of them out there that look horrendous. And the problem is that they take this RETATRUTIDE and then they don't eat. and it eats them away. It's like they're on a starvation diet essentially, which is what they're doing. So the body is not only eating fat, it's eating up all the muscle, and they're losing weight, but they're losing solid lean muscle tissue, and they look like skeleton. They look like they have cancer, is what they look like they have. They look like they have a wasting syndrome, and everyone's like, oh, they're clones and they're not this and they're different people. No, they're just people who are on starvation diets essentially. Their bodies are malnourished and they're starving. Guys, if you take RETATRUTIDE, and I know for most bodybuilders this doesn't apply, you don't skip meals. Okay, if you're skipping meals because your appetite is that bad because it takes away your appetite, then you're taking too much of it. You don't need that much. Some people only need 1 milligram a week, and some people like to microdose it every day. I think that's a little overkill. I think if you really want to, split the dosage, if you don't want to take it once a week, you can take it twice a week, maybe every 3 days. I think that would be a better option. But you could really take your shot once a week. And like I said, 1 to 2 milligrams is plenty if you're dieting for a competition, because you want to be able to eat your regular meals. If you're eating 6 times a day, you got to get those meals, and you just don't want to snack in between meals. And believe me, if you're taking the RETATRUTIDE, you're not gonna want to eat. And it's not for everyone. If you're a disciplined eater already, you don't need it. Don't take it because it constipates you. And so that's why everyone on RETATRUTIDE, buys my Fiberlize, which is why I'm a big advocate of it. No, it does work, the stuff, but it's not for everyone. Everyone doesn't need it. But if you happen to be like a snacker or someone who cheats on your diet, it's a great therapy. It's very expensive in a pharmacy. A lot of times they're out of it, but Titan Medical Center has a really good supply of it. They have a very good price on it, and they're doing a discount this week only. So contact them at titanmedicalcenter.com. Tell them the Dave Palumbo RX Muscle sent you. They're going to give you a great discount.
So again, visit titanmedicalcenter.com, mention Dave, mention RX Muscle, and ask about their blood work special as well. Discounted, very helpful, obviously, for bodybuilders. Let's go to the rest of our questions. The primary source for our questions is our YouTube community page. So if you go to the YouTube channel, look at the post tab. That's where we collect the questions for the show. Look at the picture for the Ask Dave post, and that's where you can ask your questions on this episode. I've never heard you talking about lunges. Did you get those huge hamstrings and glutes with just squats, leg presses, and leg curls?
I would say that 98% came from from squatting and the conventional stuff. I would, but I guess you'd say like maybe 6 or 8 weeks after a show, a lot of times I would incorporate lunges on a Smith machine, which is really not a lunge. It's really a one-legged leg squat or something like that. So I would step back. So I'd have the bar on me on the Smith machine, and I would step backwards. And the leg that still didn't go backwards is the leg I would squat down on, and I would do what we call lunges on the Smith machine, but it really seemed like more like a one-legged squat. But you can't go that heavy on that. I don't even know why I would do it. I would just do it for the feel, for the contraction. And I always thought, like, pre-contest, we always was under the belief that if you did some more shaping exercise, the old shaping exercise BS. But I figure it can't hurt, and so I would do like maybe 2 sets of those at the end of a workout. They're pretty good, but I always worried about the walking lunges like that Ronnie did in the parking lot, because if you have one wrong misstep, you can really mess your knee up pretty good, because bodybuilders have strength in a straight line, but we don't really have good lateral side to side strength because we're overdeveloped this way and we're not developed this way. That's why if you were a bodybuilder and you went and played volleyball or tag football, you wind up destroying yourself because your body's not made to do that. You're overtrained in the wrong direction. So I felt like walking lunges were just a little dangerous. So I never really did those, even though back in the 90s, that was the thing to do, because in the early 2000s, because Ronnie was doing them in the parking lot of Metroflex with 1,000 degrees outside. And he was doing 315 lunges across the parking lot. I never did that. I think it's a lot safer if you're going to do them on a Smith machine.
Question about injection sites and getting rid of pain. I've never heard this. Maybe you can speak to it. Do you recommend taking a handheld massager to an injection site after an injection to help the oil disperse? Interesting.
No, the oil it's not going to have any problem dispersing. It doesn't need you to help it. And you might even just over irritate the area if you're putting too much on it. Now, if you take a shot and you actually have the injection site pain, maybe because you took something that has test propionate in it and it hurts, Maybe you thought you were taking like, Decker, and it was really disproportionate and it hurts. My suggestion is 2 Tylenol. Acetaminophen usually will get rid of that pain, because what it is it's not really a pain from the injection. It's a prostaglandin reaction that's happening. So it's inciting these inflammatory and, sometimes these prostaglandins that will actually even cause you to get a temperature or be achy, like when you have the flu. So Tylenol kind of negates all that, so you can take 2 Tylenol and that should go away. If you have like, a lump in there because maybe there was something balled up or it didn't get absorbed, probably then you could put a massage gun on it a little bit and then ice it after that. But by and far, most of the time, the pain in an injection site is not usually due to you hitting anything, or it's usually just due to whatever you're injecting might just be cause an inflammatory reaction, or might even be causing what we call a steroid flu, but it's really like inciting similar to a flu or a viral type of reaction by getting irritating and getting these prostaglandins, firing at higher levels than they should. That's why as soon as you take 2 Tylenol, within 10, 15 minutes, you feel 100 times better.
Question about from a conversation that you had on After Hours, which, by the way, new episode right now on the channel, with an appearance from Jimmy the Bull. Following on the topic of this generation of young guys being very feminine, low testosterone, that was discussed in After Hours, how are there some kids between 16 and 21 who are very strong lifters, and a lot of they weigh disproportionately to their low size and feminine traits? So it's just they're very strong in the gym, yet still have very, very unmanly traits.
I think genetically, I just think some kids are just like stronger than other kids, right? I mean, I know my son is very aggressive and he's very strong. He's kind of like more hyper masculine too. And I don't know if that's just within him, or if it's, because I'm his dad, or whatever the case may be. He's a pretty tough kid, but I know what they're talking about. I've seen these kids, they're super strong, because I go to jiu-jitsu and I watch these kids. They're really good, and they're like crybabies at the same time. If they get hurt, they start crying. But meanwhile, they're the best ones in jiu-jitsu. So I think that's just personality. And I think all kids, especially when they're in that like 8 years old to 12-year-old range, they're kind of still like, they're growing into being men, but they're kind of still kids. And I don't like to really judge them at that point, because I've seen people completely do turnarounds once they hit puberty. Kids kind of hit puberty around 12, so that's when they start to really change. It seems like there are guys out there that do look like they've been feminized, and I don't know if that's because of like the microplastics or the estrogens and all the food, or if it's just, once again, it's a genetic thing. I know a lot of kids smoke weed these days, and weed really raises estrogen levels by lowering testosterone. In other words, it makes more of your testosterone convert to estrogen. So that could be a problem. It's hard to tell. And I don't know, maybe we're just more aware too. Maybe it existed when we were kids too, and we just weren't aware of that it was going on, because there wasn't all this talk about it. There wasn't social media. People just were people. Because I remember in gym class, there were kids that just, were super strong, and you couldn't believe they were super strong. And then there were kids that looked like, they couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag, and they were the worst athletes. And that's just the way it went. And I think it's the same nowadays. I think just people are more conscious of it because everyone's on social media. So does it mean anything? Probably not. It's probably not that significant. I think we're just more aware these days of the fact that there are a lot of differences between our kids.
Another training related question. If shoulders and arms are a weak point, is it advisable to bring the workout weak with shoulders and arms? Or begin rather. So looks like a Google Translate. Advisable to begin the workout week with shoulders and arms, and you like isolated movements mixed in with double movements. Example, barbell press, then say dumbbell press. And is weight important for shoulder growth, or intensity more important? Do you recommend behind the back? There's a lot going on here, but I guess, do you start with your weak points and then kind of doubling it up, like say barbell press and dumbbell press? And is weight important for shoulder growth, or is intensity?
I think it's important that if you do have a weak body part, it's nice to train it the day after a rest day. So if you're doing 2 rest days a week, maybe if shoulders and arms are your weaknesses, maybe do your shoulders after one rest day, and then the arms after the other rest day that you do. Ostensibly, they're separated. They're not 2 days in a row. And if you have a really weak part, you might want to have your cheat meal the night before that 1 week body part. So the weakest body part. The question of how to train, I think that full range of motion is the most important aspect of training. So if you're doing full range of motion and you're controlling the negative, and in other words, you're controlling the weight. If you're doing shoulder presses, you're controlling the way down, you're squeezing on the way up, explosively controlling the way down, and you're doing full range of motion. I think that you're doing the movement right. Now it's a matter of how much weight can you lift with full range of motion, okay, and the right form. And that's when you have to start pushing. So the more weight you can do with full range of motion and good form, the better you're going to perform, and the better you're going to get results-wise, But in other words, if you can't keep good form and full range of motion, then don't raise the weight, I think that people get too preoccupied with how much they're lifting, and then they wind up doing like partial reps, which is not going to help. So that's a no-no for sure. So full range of motion, control the movement, control the negative, and then high intensity. Obviously, you want to give 100% to your set so that when you're done, you got nothing left. And that's the key. The problem is a lot of people they'll sacrifice form to get more weight, and that's definitely not going to be good. Likewise, you don't want to just do good form with high reps. That's not going to build muscle either. You need to keep increasing the weight and pushing yourself, even if you're only getting 2-3 reps. If you're doing full range and you're controlling the weight, you're going to get good development.
I'll take a couple more questions. One about a vitamin called, he wants to know the applications of vitamin P5P for bodybuilders. Should they be taking it, and what are the benefits?
Yeah, all P5P or pyridoxal 5-phosphate is the activated form of B6, vitamin B6. So now we talk about methylfolate and methylcobalamin, which is methylcobalamin is the activated form of vitamin B12, and methylfolate is the activated form of folic acid. When you activate these B vitamins, they're more potent. They can do something. It's because some people lack the ability to do that genetically. So they have a genetic defect and they cannot methylate, certain B vitamins. And if you can't do that, you can't store them, you can't use them properly. The issue is, I think, like this Gary Breck is the one who first really brought this to light a lot. And the problem is he made it seem as though it's an all or none thing. Like either you can methylate them or you can't. It's usually it's usually in between. Like some people, like I'm a poor methylator of B12 and folic acid, but I can still methylate it a little bit, or I probably would have died, when I was, a kid, I obviously take all methylated B vitamins, and V Mineralize now, our species nutrition multivitamin, multimineral, trace metal antioxidant formula has all methylated B vitamins in it purposely because a lot of people are deficient in their ability to methylate these things. So you don't have to go take extra vitamins. Now, the pyridoxal 5-phosphate, same thing with B6. More people, there's very few people who can't, turn these into an active form. So the question remains, if you take this supplement, is it going to give you the benefits? It might not. In other words, taking vitamin B6 alone, which is going to be in any good multivitamin like my V Mineralize, is going to be enough because your body will convert it to active form. So I think a lot of people get caught up in saying, oh, well, this form of the vitamin is more active. Well, that's true, and that's important if you can't activate it. But for most people, 99% of the population, they can activate the B6 to work the way it has to. So they just taking B6 is enough. But yeah, I mean, that is an active form of the vitamin. I don't think most people need to spend extra money on taking that form of it. But I guess it can't hurt.
Take one more question about low doses of GH. Is it possible to grow muscle only with low doses of GH, and at what dosage?
Look, I've been saying for years that the length of time on GH is more important than how much you take. And what I mean by that, is that if you could take 2 IUs of growth hormone per day year round, you're going to get good results from that. Look, that's what we did back in the 90s. No one had enough money to take more than that. Most people couldn't take GH at all. It was very, very expensive. So we would use 2 IUs. And if you were like a guy who was making money or, a pro, you'd use maybe 4 IUs, but they would only use 4 IUs a day for 8 weeks leading up to the show. I remember Kevin Levrone was was doing it. He started 8 weeks before a show. That was it. And people thought he was on, probably 10 times that amount. But no one could afford to take that much. It was very expensive. It was hard to get too. So we used 2 IUs. And what I found is that the length of time you take it, in other words, guys would do it for 8 weeks because they couldn't afford more than that. And then they would just stop it. And then, but if you can take it, like in other words, rather than take 4 IUs a day or 5 IUs a day for 8 weeks, take 2 IUs a day for, 24 weeks. And you're going to see better results that way. So I think it's like I said. And what happens is when you take less too, you become less insulin resistant, which means you absorb your food better, which means you grow better. But remember, the more GH you take, the more insulin resistant you become. It makes it harder to absorb your food. Now you have to worry about blood sugars elevating, taking a long-acting insulin. If you take a low-dose GH, you don't have to worry about that. You're going to absorb your food, perfectly fine. You're not going to become insulin resistant. You might actually grow better long-term. But, no one these days thinks long-term. Everyone's like, all right, I finally got a hold of GH. I'm going to take 12 IUs a day because that's what I was told that so-and-so takes because I want to get the most results in the next 4 weeks. No, it's not going to happen like that. Just think long-term. If you think long-term, you're going to see results. I always thought, how much muscle can I put on in a year? If I can add a half a pound of muscle a week, okay, in 52 weeks, that's 26 pounds of muscle. That's a lot of muscle. But in order to put a half a pound of muscle on, a week, you have to make sure that you never miss a meal. All your supplements are correct. Your PEDs are right. Your training is right. Your rest is right. And that's what I always shot for. I always thought long-term like that. And you know what? For 5 or 6 years, I did that. On average, I put on 25 pounds of muscle per year. And so it can be done. You have to just really, really think long-term rather than short.
That's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. If you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss this or anything we have coming up. In 10 days, Dave, myself, and Chris Aceto will be at the New York Pro. So we're going to have wall-to-wall coverage of the show. We're going to have interviews, obviously wrap-ups, and all sorts of content. So we're going to have it all here on this channel as well as on our Instagram page, official_RX Muscle. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.